Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. On the Vera Thomas Show. Let's talk about it. Yeah.
Hello, hello, hello. I am so excited today. We are continuing part two of Stories of Forgiveness. And I'm telling you, I have a guest tonight. Her story is unbelievable. And before I pull everyone up, I'm going to play her video so that you can feel what she's gone through. So give me 1 second here. Let me pull this up so that you can review it.
He always had a Cuban cigar dripping from his mouth 24/7. A wad of $100 bills in his pocket, and a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson snub-nosed gun either under his pillow in my parents' bedroom or somewhere on his person. A family that shoots together stays together. Right, Bren? Right, Dad? A family that shoots together stays together. Right, Mom? Mom? Boom! Brenda, an actor has dropped out, and we need another naked dead body for 2 scenes. What would happen to my soul if I took my own life? I don't care that you're speaking to him on the front lawn. I want to speak to my father now. I know you're the mother, but give me the keys! Who do you think made the money? Anyway. You have to have a menage a trois. Let me go ask Sherry. I don't speak Italian either. Maybe it's a pasta. Come on. Come on. You guys are disgusting. Could you go upstairs to your bedroom and lock the door? Can I forgive Daddy, or should I hold on to this anger forever? He got a silencer for his gun. Married with mine aunt, my mother's sister? Right here and now, I choose to open my heart again.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine having to forgive someone who killed your mother and married your aunt? Can you imagine that? Well, I have 3 guests here today. And we're going to be sharing forgiveness stories. 2 of them were with me last week, and they have more forgiveness stories to talk about. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to first pull up Brenda. Hello, Brenda. How are you?
I am great. Thanks for having me. It's an odd experience watching my show as an audience member and having myself in a new way.
I mean, your story is just absolutely, absolutely unbelievable. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you the floor. And I want you to share with our audience a little more about who you are, what you do, and then share this story with us and how it, and just words can't express. And we're talking about forgiveness. How did you find forgiveness? How did you find it? Oh my God. Well, anyway, I'm going to come myself and I'm going to give you the floor.
I'll tell you. Okay, so my name is Brenda Edelman, and I actually this happened in 1995. My father, who I adored, shot and killed my mother, who was my best friend. And so I lost everything. I lost my family in one night. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, he went on and married my aunt, my mother's sister. So I lost everything. I was depressed. I didn't know how it would go on. And I was an actress at the time. And I started writing down years went by, got out of my head of I hate him, I love him, I hate him, I love him with my dad, started writing down what I had been through. And when I actually got it out of my head, and I would wake up in the morning after a sleepless night, and I all of a sudden had so much compassion for myself. And then I was an actress, and I decided to tell my story on stage in a class, not because I wanted to have a critically acclaimed one-woman show, which I have now, and I've performed in 4 countries and 10 states, but because I never thought I would take it past the class, because I was so filled with shame. I hadn't done any of my inner work. But when I got up in that 100-person class in LA and shared about what really was going on in my life, it was the first time I wasn't hiding. I got so much love. I had a standing ovation. I had a director that wanted to work with me, a producer who wanted to work with me. So I just kept saying yes. And I put the show up in Los Angeles many moons ago at this point. People would laugh, people would cry, and I would still be absolutely miserable when I get home. And so I went back and got a master's degree in spiritual psychology, took time off from acting, and learned, okay, now that this has happened, how can I thrive again? And that's where I learned the foundation of the forgiveness work that I did, and I teach. I did take my dad to court for wrongful death after he got out of a 2.5-year sentence, a plea bargain. But I took him to court from a place of self-honor and self-love versus revenge. And it was in this process of forgiving myself, forever trusting him. And forgiveness for me with him was letting go of the resentment that I held inside of myself, so that I still set a boundary, but I didn't have to have my thoughts about him wrecking my life. And when I did practice forgiveness is when my world opened up and I fell in love again. And so I started as a coach teaching on forgiveness for many years, probably from like 2006 to 2014. And then I started teaching storytelling because I had such success with my show and speaking that people would take me out to lunch, take me out to dinner. And it was like, I'm answering the same questions. Let me show people what it's like to really dig in, not just tell a vulnerable story, not just have the skills to present it, but also how do you heal while you're doing that, so that you don't you don't go home and you're not miserable, or you hide because you've been too exposed. And so I've been teaching performers how to tell their story on stage, and entrepreneurs how to tell a much more impactful story related to their business over the years.
Oh, that is amazing. That is really amazing. And for you to have gone through that, and we're going to talk about what process you went through to forgive. But before we
going to say that. So ask me the questions after, because it was a journey.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure forgiveness is a journey, and people don't understand, it's a process, because when you've been hurt, when you've been, um, whatever the reason for the forgiveness, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of things that go along with not being able to forgive. And so it is a process. Right now, I'm going to bring up CJ. CJ Grace. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. And I'm so proud to be on stage here with Brenda. I think Brenda's story is just so amazing. And one thing that I think is so apt is Brenda's email, her website is forgivenessandfreedom.com, because my view is without forgiveness, you have no freedom. You are in your own prison all the time, and it's like somebody's done you wrong, and then you are continuing to do yourself wrong over and over and over and over. So it's absolutely vital. Yes, it may be beneficial for the other person to be feeling there is more benefit to you yourself, because it will never, you have to do it, because otherwise they never release their hold on you. And in my case, I had what I thought was a perfect marriage. And it was I remember my 25th wedding anniversary with my husband was the best one ever. And I thought that we would be spending the rest of our lives together. I had no inkling that my marriage was going to crumble. But I found out that he preferred the attentions of a younger woman. One of many affairs he'd had throughout the marriage. I just didn't know about it. It was just by that time he really, I found out, and he didn't want to give her up. So he thought he could maybe have the two of us together. And I thought about that for a while, because I didn't want my marriage to collapse. I mean, did I really want to be a part-time wife? I was talking about this part-time wife position I was offered last week on your show, Vera. But, then shortly after finding out about this infidelity, I got breast cancer. And the combination of the two, first of all, when I just found out about the infidelity, I tried to do some work on myself. I tried to forgive him. I thought, well, it always takes two, and life is a compromise. It's never perfect. And I thought that I had kind of worked things out, and I actually developed a kind of way of living, and we were sort of semi-separated, and I had a boyfriend of my own I just started seeing, and I thought, well, this is okay, I can forgive him, I can live with this. Then I got breast cancer, and all of that stuff started churning around in my head again. So when you have something else happening, then all your nasty thoughts and negativity can come, it's like a fountain of mess coming out, when you start having more adversity piled on you, and you realize, oh, I thought I'd forgiven him, I thought I'd reached a sort of comfortable level of being, but no, I didn't. I have to kind of really still continue working on this, because getting breast cancer and dealing with it pretty much on my own, while he was in Europe with his girlfriend at a resort, and there was I going through chemo, and that doesn't work. You can't have a part-time husband like that when you're going through chemo, and so now, with that having happened several years ago, because I got that was in 2014 when I got that diagnosis of breast cancer, and it was in 2012 when I found out about the right at the very end of 2012 I found out about the infidelity, or the final infidelity, let's say, and then 2014, early 2014, I got breast cancer. And now I'm very grateful about it all, because regret is not about the past, it's about the present. And if you're happy with the way things are now, you don't regret the past, because it brings you right through to where you are now. And sometimes, adversity, if it doesn't crush you, it makes you stronger.
Absolutely.
And it brings you to a path. And now I've become an author in my own right. I used to edit his books and proofread his books, my ex-husband's stuff. I was a former BBC journalist before I married him, but I let all my broadcasting work go, by the wayside when I was married. I was attending to his needs and the children and the house, and I was really sublimating my entire personality in what he needed. And I mean, he did some good things in his life. He wasn't 100% bad guy. He was a flawed human being like most of us. And I absolutely did not condone his philandering. But, after we split up, I became me again. I reclaimed my sense of humor. I wrote, first of all, Adulterer's Wife, How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not. You can see these book covers behind me here. And then my second book, which came out in 2022, was My Wild Ride, How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity. Because the fact is, there's a lot of connections between cancer and infidelity. One often follows the other. The more I researched it, the more I saw that, women who undergo all kinds of adversity, in particular infidelity and broken relationships, are very often likely to suffer breast cancer. It's a common thing. And the other way around, I came across people who had breast cancer, and because they were sort of out of commission and not particularly interested in bedroom activities while they were going through chemo and radiation, what happens? The men start wandering off and seeing other women. So I remember talking to one surgeon, for instance, and he was telling me how he had one woman who was undergoing surgery for breast cancer, and then she comes back home to a note on her table that her husband just couldn't deal with it anymore and had left her for somebody else.
And a point that this is so interesting because so oftentimes health issues are directly correlated with emotional, stressful times. And so your breast cancer and so during that time, I'm sure you're sick, you're going through this with this man, and yet you need to forgive him. And I know, and you said something that was just absolutely beautiful. You said that you have to, when you, now you like yourself. I mean, now you're happy with yourself, with all the things that you're going to and through right now. Had you not forgiven, you would have been still holding on to that. And we
Absolutely.
and we can't move forward looking back. And when we do not forgive, then we are holding on to things that have happened in the past.
That's true.
And
And that's also why a lot of women, they have very unpleasant relationships because they're with guys that really aren't treating them that well. But they have to leave them and forgive not only that guy, but
but
themselves,
themselves.
and not
Yes,
allow themselves to continue being treated like a doormat, because otherwise they will
absolutely.
recreate the same relationship with a new person. Uh,
Absolutely. And not only that, once you get out of relationships like that, you don't just become a positive, confident person overnight. It takes time because, like you said, you gave up everything to be a wife and a mother. And when that was gone, you had to recreate yourself. And
that's
it
true.
takes time. It takes
That,
time to do that.
that's true. And then there is also, particularly when you're going through things like cancer, there's this, some people try and impose this tyranny of positive thinking on you. Positive thinking is great, but you should never feel bad about feeling bad. There are always, when you go through cancer, when you go through the breakup of a relationship, you're going to have some dark nights of the soul. You're going to feel like shite. You're going to really not be at your best. But it is a phase. You have to allow those emotions to go through you and come out. Because if you're just bottling it up with a fake smile on your face, you can just, you aren't going to be a happy person. You're
Right.
pleasing other people are thinking, oh, look what an upbeat person they are, they're so good, they're managing to get through it. Stiff upper lip, yes, let's keep calm and carry on. Very, very British. But
Yeah.
you can have a smile on your face and look fabulous to other people and still be so depressed that you end up committing suicide.
And
You've got
you
to
go
get
through.
through it yourself. You've got to get through
uh,
the dark and to get to the light.
I would like
ab-
to add something too after you.
Go ahead. Well,
Uh,
I was just going to say that you go through stages of grief. With that illness, you're going through grief. With a divorce or a infidelity or whatever it is you're going through, you go through stages of grief. And so it's natural to be down, to be in denial, to be angry, depressed, and all of those things to get over on the other side. I'm sorry, Brenda, go ahead.
no, no, it's adding to that, that false positivity. because I know that I am, after what happened in my life, I was like, well, I just have to forgive my father, or, spiritual bypass. I just have to forgive him because it's not going to bring my mother back. But the problem was that, and it's why my book is My Father Killed My Mother and Married My Aunt, Forgiving the Unforgivable. But it has my 3-step forgiveness process in it. And in that first step, which is moving out of denial into acceptance of what is, I have several exercises. And one of them is healthy release of anger work, because I feel like I was depressed for as long as I was because I kept squashing, right? We're taught, especially as women, to be nice, to be like, well, you can't do something about that, so just squash it. And so it's really important to do freeform writing, go to, I went to a primal scream workshop. I went for my master's in spiritual psychology. I couldn't even get to the depth of my anger for 2 years because I kept pushing and pushing it. And of course, the healing started when I released it and said, oh, now I don't have to I don't have to do other things so that I don't face the anger, which could lead
Yes.
to addictions and things like that. And that's why people get sick, because they hold it in instead of
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you don't pull it out, if it doesn't come out and it stays in, you can't help but be sick.
Well, if you're
because of
relationships, because you can't have people come close, or you're mean to the people who don't deserve it because you're upset about something else,
And I want you to indicate those 3 things again so that I can put them in the chat. And we have another guest. Let me pull her up right quick. Didn't forget about you, Ariel. I did not. Before I have you speak, Brenda, can you give me those 3 points?
Were there 3 things? I don't even know what I said. That you have to get, like,
yes.
Something, you have to get rid of the anger. You have to first bring it up in a safe way, because we're often taught not to. So there's something called freeform writing, where you can just literally write out your emotions. But it took me to go to a primal scream workshop after 2 years of a master's degree and other soul retrieval, cutting the cord, to see other people being like, I effing hate you, like really get to it, because otherwise it's stuck inside you.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
one, going to a therapist that focuses on anger, because a lot of therapists will access you out of your emotions because they don't know how to handle their own emotions. Some, I won't be completely general, if they're not, there's a lot of therapy. I'm so grateful I went to therapy too, but they access you out of those emotions because they don't know how to handle it. So that's why you want to go to a therapist for that.
Yeah, I was just co-hosting a show today on emotional intelligence and how important that is. And where forgiveness is concerned, it ties in with it as well. Now, Ariel, thank you for being here. And the video that you just saw that started the show was created by Ariel. Ariel, share with us one of your forgiveness stories and what you did and how you overcame.
Yeah, sure. So, I started off with cystic fibrosis. I was born with it, and it's a pretty bad lung disease. And I also had heart surgery, open heart surgery, and I died for like 10 minutes. And it was difficult for me to overcome not living a normal life. I was always in the hospitals, and I had to grow to like myself the way that I was. I had to love myself the way that I was, regardless of any condition that I had, even if I looked different, because I didn't always look the way that I do now. I had to grow into the person that I am. But I also knew at a young age that I didn't have to feel the way that I felt, but I could also create my future. And that's where I started creating this mindset. Now, having that mindset towards my sickness, I do believe it has a lot to do with the fact that I was always trying to create the reality that I had in my head. So I knew that I could have children. I knew that I would have health. I knew that I wouldn't have to get a lung transplant, not because I can predict the future, but because I was doing all the things that I needed to do to be able to have the future that I desired. I worked really hard every day with my physical health. I tried all kinds of different ways to heal myself holistically, um, because of the effects that the pharmaceutical pills would cause on me, would contradict everything that I was doing. So I found an alternative. And that's where I began to have the mindset of there's always a way. There's always something that you can create as long as you are connected with yourself and you know exactly what it is that your body is trying to tell you. And
Uh,
I grew into my, yeah, go
I
ahead.
wanted to ask you, so a part of forgiveness that you had to go through had to do with forgiving yourself. Is that a part of your forgiveness story as well?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah, yes. So
it can be.
when when we talk about forgiveness, um, and Ariel, I know that you've gone through some things that you've where forgiveness has had to be a part of your growth and your becoming the person that you are today. Can you share with us some of the things that you did to kind of overcome some of the hurts and disappointments and discouragements that you've experienced yourself?
Yeah. So all of that was kind of leading up to what I'm about to say. Um, I had to go through all that to be able to even overcome the things that I have overcome. Otherwise, it could be a completely different story. Um, I am constantly forgiving the person who is an alcoholic, who did things on levels that is extremely hard to forgive. Um, I don't particularly want to get into details,
Right.
but um, having to watch yourself do it every day in front of giving love while you're not receiving it is extremely difficult. And boundaries being put up, there's things that I had to learn how to do to still be able to live a healthy life.
Yes.
And it's extremely hard, but there's always a way to overcome the things that are in front of you. You just have to create your reality. And, if that person doesn't align and the boundaries aren't being met, then they have to go somewhere else. And they'll come back if it's allowed. At least that's what I've learned, that you have control over everything around you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And this is a tough topic, but is a topic that needs to be expressed because there are a lot of people out here that's hurting and not knowing how to forgive those who may have hurt them. So I want us to take a few minutes and I want each of you to share some of the things that you had to do to get past the hurt. And Brenda, your story is just unbelievable. I can't even imagine. And I want to ask you now your relationship with your dad. And I think you said he spent 3 years in jail.
He spent 2.5 years on a plea bargain. He got 5 years, and for good behavior, they let him out for
He
shooting,
should have been in for 20.
shooting my mom in the head and killing her. But it's domestic violence, and there was a cleanup there for 8 hours. The police weren't called, and the gun disappeared. So my brother agreed to the plea bargain. Yeah, I have two things I want to share. Um,
Okay.
about the forgiveness process. I had a revelation that after my master's, that if I hated a part of my father, I hated a part of myself. If I shut my heart down to my father, somehow I was also shutting my heart down to myself. I was abandoning a part of myself. And I was also having that shut down with other people. And so for me, I did a lot of inner child work, like parenting myself, being the father to myself, being the mother to myself that I didn't have, the good qualities. And I also did a ceremony of release. I went to the top of a mountain, and I had a hat of my dad's. So it was a ceremony, and I threw it over the mountaintop after expressing a poem about that oneness with us. So that was one way that I actually kind of solidified or got to another level of healing, by doing that ceremony. And then years later, and I teach my clients not, to actually release it, because even if someone is like passed on or they're in another state, you think they don't affect you. But if you hold on to that righteous anger, it affects you. And so I remember it was like, I don't know, 6 years ago or something like that. I was driving from, I think it was San Diego to Los Angeles, or the other way around. And my aunt, who I'm very close with, who didn't marry my father, called me and said that my aunt had died. And my father died many years ago. My aunt, who had married my father. And I was like, whatever. And, people have called me like the queen of forgiveness, this and that. That was not very queenly. And so what happened was, right after she hung up, I literally felt my mother's presence on the other side, just welcoming her sister over to the other side with love and openness. And I thought, damn, I did that thing I tell my clients not to do. Like, unconsciously, I held on to that anger toward my aunt for my mother, as if my mother was still like upset about the betrayal. And I realized that I could just let that go, that in spirit, there is none of that,
Wow. That is beautiful. And so you were able to forgive, actually, you were able to forgive your aunt through your mother.
Yeah. For my love for my mother. And
Oh,
yes. And there was a lot of self-forgiveness because I trusted my dad, like all that stuff that comes forward. But really the key is we have to forgive ourselves, because we can only forgive someone else the level we forgive ourselves for. Like, of course, in the advanced course, there's no forgiveness that's needed, but still, it's kind of like love. You can only love someone as much as you can love yourself. So,
absolutely. Beautiful. Absolutely. CJ Grace.
I think you have to understand that forgiveness is not condoning the behavior. You can still say, no, that's never going to happen to me again. But the trouble is, and what the mantra was of my Adulterer's Wife book, How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not, is that the best revenge is to get past the need for it. Because revenge, resentment, these are all such toxic emotions. I know that there's a wonderful quote which says that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I think
Wow.
that
Say that again. Say that again.
Resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That actually came from St. Augustine a long time ago. It's a pretty old quote, but a lot of people have put it in their books. I know that Carrie Fisher, for instance, put it in one of her nonfiction books. But it is so true. You've got to realize that it is not going to serve you. And in my case, this was the father of my kids. I was going to have to be interacting with my grown kids. Was I going to be bad rapping their father to them all the time and telling them what a nasty piece of work he was? How would that make them feel? And why would I want to do that? So you have to get through it. It's just, I suppose I'm a very pragmatic person, and it came to me as a very obvious thing when I looked online and saw all this vitriol. There's so many vitriolic sites that are sort of based on, wow, look at this amazing resentment story, this amazing revenge story that I had on my cheating spouse. One of the ones that I know from a friend of mine who was in Jerome, Arizona. So there was a contractor who found out that his wife was unfaithful, and what did he do? He filled her car with cement.
Oh my God.
A story. I mean, it's a great form of revenge, but where do you go after that? What if you need to negotiate about custody of the kids, or find out passwords to the bank accounts? Or or anything, and or carry on a relationship of any kind whatsoever. How do you go forward after filling your unfaithful spouse's car with cement? It's
Right.
very easy. You just have to find ways, and I did a lot of work on myself. Some of it was a lot of alternative work, a lot of spiritual work. I was very lucky to have a lot of friends who were in the counseling field who gave me a lot of very valuable advice. I didn't go and see a paid counselor. Some people need to do that. But I had this sort of 6-part program that got me through, and it made a big difference. You have to have confidants and mentors. That's very important. You have to have a community of friends. You have to have laughter therapy, because laughter is the best medicine for everything in life.
Yes.
You can see
Yes.
the absurdity of life, that everything that happens to you is one big cosmic joke. It's not necessary, and you may be the butt of that joke, but it's still a cosmic joke. And then the fourth thing is that you have to love your body, which means you don't have to become beautiful inside, not necessarily outside, because I'm never going to be a supermodel, but you have to treat your body well, eat well, have enough sleep, eat a good diet, all of that stuff. And then that will make you feel better. You have to find your passion, do something that makes you want to get up in the morning, that makes you feel truly alive, that makes you feel like you have a path in life. And then the final thing I did, which is always a work in progress, is to try and become more mindful and live in the present. Because if you're just churning about the past, oh, he did this, and maybe if I'd have done that, it wouldn't have turned out that way, and maybe it was my fault, but why was he like that? And maybe he shouldn't have done this. What point is it? It's all gone. It's history. And then you can worry about the future. Well, oh my God, what's going to happen? I don't know where I'm going to be. And will I ever have a successful relationship with anybody else? And will my health ever come back to normal? Will I get cancer again? Well, what's the point? You can do things that promote a healthy, happy existence, but you can't see what's going to happen in the future. It doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist.
Right. It
All you have
doesn't. It's
is the
now.
present. And so if you're
Yes.
not enjoying the present, or if you're not even conscious of the present because you're worrying about the future and churning the past, you really aren't really, you're just not
You're
living.
not living. You're not living. You can't move forward looking back. And if we can't focus on what's happening right now, this very moment, we're losing something, because each moment is a precious moment. It's
Yeah,
precious, no matter what it is you're going through, but that moment, it won't come back. It's done. You can't reflect on it in the past, because it's done.
right.
You
You
know,
could be in the most
and you can't
beautiful
even.
place, with you could be swimming with dolphins in a gorgeous tropical paradise, and your mind's somewhere else. You're worried what
Yes. Come on
it's not
now.
real to you. You're not enjoying what's in front of your nose.
Absolutely. And Ariel, let me give you the floor.
I was just curious. So Brenda, you have such
Oh,
a dramatic story. I'm interested to know a little more about your story and how you deal with dealing with interacting and forgiving at the same time, because I know that you feel those same feelings. I'm sure they still reoccur somewhat, right? When you're around him and the thoughts are running through your head, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, my father actually died back in 2004. But what I will say is, and I took him to court for wrongful death. So my mom was killed in 1995. I decided to take my dad to court for wrongful death in 2000, and then 2001 is when it was. Got my master's degree, started doing my storytelling. Interesting enough, because I teach a very specific way of doing a one-person show, I wrote my healing into existence. I truly believe it, because it's cathartic to write, but I actually played my father on stage. And what happened is that as a good actress, you cannot play yourself as a villain. And so I got to realize this is a man that had dreams, that had this relationship with my mom, that definitely had mental illness, like all of these things. And it helped me have to have compassion for him, without condoning, of course, because I did take him to court for wrongful death to and I didn't have him in my life anymore because he was not remorseful. And they never say have the person in your life. I'm sure he would had, had sociopathic tendencies and narcissistic tendencies and all that. But what I will say is that while he was, thank God I got the master's degree in spiritual psychology, because I literally took a month from what they told me to do and measured, how do I feel when he calls me? How do I feel when we talk? How do we feel when I've cut him out of my life and I'm like, I'm not gonna get in touch with him? And I realized I was hurting myself with the way he wasn't even in my life, and I was still thinking about the past and not in the present moment. So for me, I realized, like, when I did this project, we were working on our worst relationship, and I thought it was gonna end with me reconciling with him somehow. And then I had this realization, like you were saying, Ariel, earlier, that he didn't take responsibility. He didn't talk about anything I wanted to talk about, that I could not have him in my life, that he was toxic for me. And on top of that, when I had the realization that and learned about narcissism, and that he literally thought differently than me, so I couldn't say, take responsibility, can't you see this? It freed up my energy so much. And all of a sudden, I could really start taking care of myself. But with him, I did make the decision to take him to court for wrongful death, which was probably the most powerful decision I made in my life, to stand up to my father. And he skipped town. So, in a way, I didn't have to deal with having him in my life again. However, I thought I had done all the healing. And then when he died, when I found out, I realized that my inner child was like, I thought I'd still have my dad back. And he'd say he was sorry. And so actually, when he died, I had a lot of freedom after the grief, and I just put it in its place. And I can tell you, and it's 20 years later, I can tell you that I am not triggered by stuff with my dad. I mean, I've here and there had things happen. And then because, like you, we've all done all this inner work, I address it. Like, I did something. I was performing in 2019 in Mexico with my one person show. And 6 months before, on Father's Day, a friend was going to a shooting range. I'd done all this healing over my father. And I was like, I feel like I need to go to the shooting range. My dad and I used to go shooting together. And I went, and I healed something. I did a ceremony. I took the target sheet home. I did a healing ceremony. I went on stage the following month, and I've done my show for thousands of people. And in the moment where I I say, what happened in the show, I've always kind of played it the same way, really angry. I broke down in sobs and tears, because underneath that healing I had done in my life was sadness, and it was exquisite, and I got to heal myself more. So sometimes, I mean, that was, night 2019. So it was another layer of healing I didn't even know was there. But for the most part, I am not triggered by it. So the boundaries are really, really important, to just say, is this person loving? Are they regretful? Are they remorseful? If not, let them go, but out of love for yourself versus anger toward them.
Amen. Now we've had several comments coming in that I want to just address, and then Ariel, please continue to help me interview. Appreciate it. And so become more mindful, living in the present. And then now he says, "Well, you got three guests, and now no one brought anyone." Well, we promoted this. Let me tell you.
Yeah, promote
Uh,
it. Promote it.
Yes, yes, and yes, you promote it. Help us. Tell people to come. And then when you were saying your dad never apologized or any of that, they never say sorry, especially if they're not narcissistic.
Right. But interesting enough is, when I was younger, I was like, why can't he just tell me what happened? Why can't he do this? And only in reflection and maturity, I'm like, why would he tell me what happened? What's he going to say? I shot her. I did this. Like, it's not going to make anything better. The closure actually does not come with the other person. The closure.
Right, it does. And the beautiful thing is, it's been a journey. It's been a journey, because even after you thought you had worked through all of this, you're on stage and it comes out again, and
Oh,
it
that's
happens.
my technique. So I wasn't sobbing through the rest of the show. Yeah.
Right, but it happens that way. There may be things that trigger those things, even though you have forgiven. sometimes there are things that happen that triggers you or brings that back, and there's a flood of tears or emotion.
And that's the chance to be kind with ourselves. I probably with all of you, you realize this too. Sometimes that happens and people get mad at themselves because why am I already thought I dealt with this instead of that's an opportunity to be more compassionate with ourselves.
Yes, awesome. Okay, Ariel.
No, I love everything. I think it's beautiful because it's what I see is you have created your reality, your peace. Like you found a way to create it in the middle of complete chaos, in the middle of just hatefulness and destructiveness, destroying someone that you loved, but you found a way to create the reality that you deserve. And that's beautiful because, you know, we struggle to be able to do that because of what the world is constantly telling us how we should perceive things, or telling us what we are thinking and how we're feeling. And the ability to be aware as you are and learn exactly, well, you're telling me this, but I'm too aware of what I'm feeling, so you can't alter and shift all of my thoughts because I'm too aware.
Yeah.
And that gives you power.
So
Absolutely. Beautiful. One of the things I want you guys to talk about, because both of you, all of you, well, CJ, you and Brenda had mentioned boundaries. And so when forgiving, or when, and you talked about women that stay in these things knowing that it's not the best thing for them, but yet they're there. And I know, CJ, you said that your ex-husband, he had done this over and over again. Now, you may not have been aware of all the times that he did it, but you were there, you stayed with him, and then finally that was it. So, Brenda and CJ and Ariel, if you can just kind of share the boundaries, and when do you get to the point where you say, okay, I've got to forgive, but I got to move on? When do you do that?
it is really hard to do it on your own when you've been trained to be in a relationship where you've lost a bit of yourself. For me, my father being the father figure, being daddy's little girl, even though I was an adult, what I will say is that I wish I could say I was just so self-aware back then, and I just said, you know what, this doesn't work for me. It wasn't. It was like a last straw thing. I was talking to him after he got out of prison, and he mentioned that he was going to take me to court to get some of the money I got in my inheritance, because by New York law, 1/3 was owed to him. And I just remember, like, if I could have dropped to my knees, I would have, just my jaw dropping and thinking, this man is so toxic. He tried to kind of manipulate me to be back in his life. And my brother had wanted to take him to court for years. And I just remember I hung up the phone with him. I called my attorney and said I was ready to take my father to court for wrongful death with my brother. And so that was where boundary came in. A really strong boundary came in. It's a matter of separating yourself from what you've been trained to be for this other person, I feel like.
I hear you. And one of my forgiveness stories, I grew up I mean, my marriage was a mentally, physically, emotionally abusive, verbally abusive. And I stayed in that marriage for 3 years. And finally, when he attacked me in front of my son, I knew then I can't continue in this vein. Had he not attacked me in front of my son, I might have stayed in the relationship. But because he did, I knew then I could not stay in that relationship. But the thing is, prior to my marriage, I was confident. I was doing things. I mean, my life was going pretty good. And then I got married and it all left. All my confidence, all my self esteem, all the stuff that I have worked so hard to acquire, I lost it all. It literally took me 3 years to get back to myself. And when we're in the stuff, we don't realize We
No.
don't realize what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And the gaslight, there's gaslighting, there's all kinds of things where you start to question yourself if you're not. Well, for me, I was brought up in such a dysfunctional family, so I was kind of trained like that my father was the one who had the answers and this and that. So congratulations to get yourself back in 3 years, right? So many people don't even get themselves back.
Well, I figured for every year of marriage, it took that many years and it's a continual work. It's not like the
Yeah.
3 years, and plus I had my son, and I knew I did not want that to impact him. So I had to, as I'm building my confidence, I had to build his as well, and the things I was doing for myself, I need to do for him as well. But it's hard. It's really hard to just let go,
I know.
especially,
Kids aren't trained. We're trained to stay in those roles, I feel like. And
yes.
it does become habitual. Like for any of you who have studied Joe Dispenza or something like that, it's not just like mental thoughts and being positive and affirmations. It's like in your brain, the grooves in your brain of like, this is what I do. This is the habit. This is who I listen to. And then if you don't know how to connect with your inner voice, because there's so much noise in the world and you haven't heard about, like, that was pivotal for me, being in silence and doing inner child work, learning about that.
And
Yes.
I took a controversial view because I was really grateful that I didn't know about my ex-husband's philandering throughout the marriage, because that meant that we had children that could live in an intact home, that we didn't have to choose between splitting up and having the children have to go from one home to the other. And my ex-husband was very hands-off with kids, so they wouldn't have had they wouldn't have had much nurturing over on his turf. And so I was grateful to be able to do that and not have to either live apart with the children living in two homes or live together with that horrible resentment that would have hung over probably both of us and made the kids really have to wonder what's going on between mom and dad. And a lot of people said to me, oh, if I would have known, I would have left right away. I would have found myself another partner. How could you stay with somebody if you had even a slight inkling that they were being unfaithful? Well, maybe I was being deliberately blind to what was going on. I don't know, but I stuck with him until I actually found out, until it was so clear. It sort of hit me in the face with a text on the phone when I was trying to set up his phone to a new phone. And at that point, a text came in from his current woman. It couldn't have been
Wow.
more blatant. And so, and he wasn't willing to let her go. He said he was in love with her and all of this kind of stuff. And by that time, the kids were out of the house. And so at least, even though it is horrible for the children, even if they're grown, when their mom and dad split up, it was nowhere near as bad as it would have been for them if they would have still been young and living in the house. So,
Well, let me ask you.
controversial view, though, some people really did not agree with me on that.
Well, let me ask you, if you had known when your children were still young, and I know this is hindsight 20, would you have stayed, or would you have, what do you feel you would have done?
Well, if he would have dumped the woman, yes. I mean, even in this final affair, with the final affair, if he would have agreed to dump the woman and no longer have a sexual relationship with her or whatever, I would have stayed, and it would have been a mistake. It would have been a mistake because I am so much happier on my own. I don't regret the marriage. I have two great grown kids. There were some good things that we shared together when we were married. We were married maybe over nearly 30 years. But I don't know. It's a very difficult question. I would have probably wanted to preserve the marriage. And who knows if I would have tried to work out some kind of arrangement, even if he was still seeing this person. It wouldn't have been a happy situation. And I know,
And
for
your
example,
kid,
a lot of celebrities do that. The celebrity wives find out about the guys philandering, and most of them are philandering, and most of the time, I believe, in the celebrity world. And then they
yes.
just put up with it because they have a standard of living, they have a house, they have their kids, they have their life, and they don't really want to give it up. It has to get to a level where it's just intolerable and then they leave. And as I said, I'm grateful that I didn't have to make that decision, because it would have been a very difficult and unpleasant one, and it would not have benefited the children. Whichever decision I made, it would not have been as good for the kids as it would have been not knowing and growing up in an intact home. That's my view. That's what I
Right. But if the intact home is toxic, if the in if the home, an intact home, if kids are seeing how each other are being treated,
That's
you
true. But
know,
in your case, you had a violent husband. My husband was not violent. I mean,
right.
he may have been sort of verbally unpleasant at times, but not, he just was, like compliments were about as rare from him as a polar bear in the tropics. I mean, I didn't get a lot of
No,
compliments.
right.
But
And
apart from that, he didn't hit me. We had a good standard of living. He worked hard at his job. He didn't have an alcohol problem. He didn't have a drug
okay.
problem. So
Okay.
it wasn't
A totally different
terrible.
situation.
It's a
Yes.
different situation. I think if you're involved with, if you have a domestic abuse going on, you do need to get out of there and find a safe haven. That's a whole different story. I wasn't,
Yes.
thankfully, and I'm grateful that I wasn't in that
Yes.
situation.
Well, that's awesome. And you know what? Can you believe it is fit? We have 4 minutes left, and I have not done one commercial. And I've got to, oh my God. Oh my God. I got to do one. And then I'm going to come back and we've the three that we've I'm going to give Ariel some time to say some things before we leave. We're going to have to do this again. Oh my goodness. I cannot believe this time went by so fast. And oh my goodness. Okay, hold on. Let me do this commercial right quick.
Your trauma talks. Your trauma.
Yeah.
Your trauma talks. Your trauma talks. Your trauma talks. Trauma talks. Trauma talks. Your trauma. This is your trauma. Your trauma. Life is full of surprises. But you, because your trauma is your fault. Life has kicked you to the curb, but you have picked yourself up many times, because your trauma is your trauma, mental health trauma, your trauma city, where you will be set to sleep and tell your trauma.
That was traumatic. Your trauma talk is, and actually, the one that's coming up is June 13th, and I'm honored to be one of the speakers for that. In New York, on Broadway, June 13th. And if you are interested, I'm going to put up the flyer right quick, and the QR code is on it. So click the QR code and check it out. Your trauma talk. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about trauma, the trauma that we have to forgive. And if we don't forgive, then as we're hurting ourselves more than we're hurting anybody else. So there's the QR code. Click it, and I have to stop this banner in order for you to click it. So click the code, and I hope to see you in New York on June 13th. All right. I can't believe the time. Can you guys believe the time? All right. Ariel.
Well, I kind of lost track of where we were, but I am just very thankful that I get to be here with you ladies. And yeah, I mean, we all have our stories and we all create our realities. We're all responsible for who we are, who we become. One we're also responsible for our traumas and healing ourselves. And that's all a learning process that we've all had to embark on ourselves. So it's nice to be in the room with similar people who have and understand the concept of actually healing and not just blaming someone else or putting a band-aid over it, but truly discovering what that means within ourselves so that we can live at the highest level, because there's no limit to that, you know.
Amen. Thank you. And CJ and Brenda, quickly, a few words. I can't just not let you say something.
Maybe I should talk first because I think the show should close with Brenda because she has such an incredible, fantastic story. I mean, I don't know. I'm bowled over with what she's been doing and how she's got over this. Can you imagine turning very, very bitter lemons into lemonade? That's exactly what she's doing. So, yeah, I mean, people say that the universe only sends you what you can actually deal with. Whatever trauma, whatever adversity you get is stuff that you can deal with and that you can go through and come out the other side a better person than where you were beforehand. And I think that sometimes if you're stuck in that dark tunnel, you may not see the light at the end of it, but it is there. And it's just a question of putting one foot in front of the other and coming out at the other side and letting go. Forgiveness is part of letting go. It's part of freedom. And without forgiving, which doesn't mean you let somebody off the hook and you condone what they've done, but without forgiving, without truly forgiving, you are not freeing yourself from the prison of your past.
Amen. Thank you. And finally, Brenda.
Yes, I agree with what everyone says. Thank you so much for having me on here. I've been just feeling so connected to you guys, and thank you for your kind acknowledgments. Everything they said, and yeah, it's about being kind to yourself, letting yourself off the hook if you've trusted someone that was untrustworthy, but starting to be conscious so that you don't make those same decisions. Inner child work was something that was just fantastic for me, as far as, well, would my inner child like me being around that person? And then getting in touch with your own, inner guidance system. And then I always reference the quote by Shakespeare, this above all else, to thine own self be
Be
true.
true. Yes.
Thank
Awesome. Thank you. Listen, please share this program with your friends and your family. Please. This is a part of the Forgiveness Project, and we're going to be doing forgiveness panels throughout the rest of these next few months. So please share this. And if you are having issues with forgiveness, know that you're hurting yourself more than you're hurting the person that you need to forgive. God bless you, and we will see you next week. No, we'll see you on Thursday. So please, ladies, hold on for a minute, okay? So God bless you. We'll see you on Thursday. Bye.
The Vera